What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Canadian Football Fanatic YouTube channel, and thank you guys for tuning in to another BC Lions post-game report. Ladies and gentlemen, that was not a pretty one, and this is going to be a long post-game report. But as always, Cole coming at you guys for a BC Lions post-game report after the BC Lions fell to the Saskatchewan Roughriders in week number 4, 37-18 in Regina. And as I mentioned, folks, it was a ugly one on behalf of the BC Lions, who, had, I guess I could say, a few moments in this game where they looked, all right, I guess you could say. But for a majority of this game, it was a rough outing and a lot of, familiar territory of kind of how they got beat. And we'll talk about it here on the post-game report. But before we get into it, of course, folks, I'm going to try to make sure that we are fired up over on Instagram as well as YouTube, which we should be up and running over on YouTube as of now. Let me make sure that we're getting our feed up on the Instagram quickly here before we get going. Then we can get into our post-game report. This is going to be, as always, therapeutic, but this is going to be a tough one, folks. If we're being honest, it's going to be hard to spin or find positives from this one because the Lions right now are a bad football team, if we're being honest, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, as I mentioned. But let me just quickly here make sure that we're good on Instagram before we get going. As always, folks, reminders, if you guys would like the video, comment down below. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts after that one. As I mentioned, a 37-18 loss, and could use some other words. Rear end kicking was not a good one for the BC Lions, and we'll chat about it. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments down below, as I mentioned, and then most importantly, subscribing to the channel. When you guys subscribe, hit the notification bell. You guys get notified every single time we go live or upload any sort of content here on the channel. So let me quickly edit this if I'm able to. Edit this question. See if now we can. Having a little bit of technical difficulties over on Instagram, but I think we'll just have to continue the show. The show must go on, as they say. So that's unfortunate. We're up on YouTube though, so if you guys are tuning in on YouTube, appreciate you guys so much. Please feel free to hang out with us in the comment section, as I mentioned, and let us know how you guys are feeling after that ugly one. So this is going to be a quicker one because, as therapeutic as I like to try to say that these are, there's not a lot of spinning. There's not a lot of positive outcomes, I think, to try to find after this one. I think this is just one of those games where if you're the BC Lions, this is simply just an ugly loss. This is not a good football team right now. You want to, get in, watch the film after this one, take what few positives you're able to find out of this game, and then it's on to Montreal. It's trying to win the next week because you can't feel sorry for yourself for too long in this league, or else you'll get left behind, and you're already in that 1-3 hole if you're the BC Lions. You don't want to think about falling to 1-4, and then 1-5, and soon you'll be snowballing out of control, out of playoff contentions before you even hit the month of August. So as I mentioned, not a lot of positive spinning here tonight on the post game report. We'll try to as much as we can, but I think this will be a little bit of a shorter one. We'll see how we get to when it's about that 45-minute mark, if we have some more to talk about or not, or it's going to be kind of that 15 minutes, a little bit shorter than usual, around that hour mark of a post game report. I have a few things I'd like to talk about for sure, and I guess we'll just kind of get into it right away, folks. It was another slow start on behalf of the BC Lions, which they just are unable to get going to start football games here early on through the first month of the season. The Lions end up being able to, I guess, get a little bit of traction to end the first quarter, but going into this game had only been able to muster 3 points total in the prior 3 games in the first quarter for the BC Lions. A very stagnant, a very uncrisp, not looking smooth offense that has been coming out for the BC Lions to start the season. And it was another, same old for the BC Lions, who came out, run the ball on first down after they get possession of the football. They try to pass the ball and it goes incomplete and they start 2 and out. And, as I mentioned with kind of the snowballing out of control about the record, they kind of, they have some positivity on the first play of the game, first snap of the game offensively, and then it just started to kind of unravel from there. And the Lions didn't look smooth. As I mentioned, they started to kind of find a little bit of rhythm to end the first quarter. But, turnovers started to creep in as they got into the second quarter. James Butler with the fumble in the first play of the second quarter. It was just it was another tough period early on for the BC Lions, who early on in these ball games, when you're playing in other people's buildings, which they have been, they've been at home luckily twice, and they've been in, arguably I don't even think arguably, the two hottest hostile, the two most hostile environments in the CFL, in Winnipeg and Saskatchewan. And if you're unable to, at least weather the storm, you don't even have to have a fast start. If you just can at least weather the storm and the home team jumps all over you, I just feel like you're playing at such a disadvantage when it comes to the home crowd, the atmosphere, the energy that's feeding the home crowd, and you're playing right into the home field's advantage of coming out slow, giving the fans something to cheer about on offense. And the other thing that was something we'll get into in a little bit here is the fact that the offense was not really on the field. They were off the field so quickly, and having the defense on the field all night, it really takes the wind out of the sail of the offense, being able to muster any sort of momentum offensively in terms of bigger plays, or kind of silencing the crowd with some of those bigger plays, especially because the defense wasn't really able to make any of those plays of their own to generate some momentum to turn it back over to the offense. They had their times where they came up with some pretty good stops, some timely stops that potentially gave their offense the opportunity to give them some life in the second half, when it was a 23-10 ball game, I believe, which in the CFL, as we know, 23-10 is that's not it's not a game over type sentence in the third quarter. That's something that's very easily attainable to come back with a few scoring drives, not even having to score on every possession in the second half, having to score on maybe one possession in the third quarter, one possession or one or two possessions in the fourth quarter. And the Lions were unable to do that. Whenever they were able to get maybe a little bit of life, they essentially threw it away by turning the ball over, which was another frustrating feat that they had another game with for 4 turnovers, which we'll get into in a little bit. But, I guess that'll kind of transition, where we can transition into the turnovers now after, another slow start from the BC Lions offense, who, go 0 for 3 in the first quarter. Saskatchewan had something crazy of, I think it was like 10 minutes and 45 seconds of time of possession in the first quarter alone, where BC had 3 possessions in 3.5 or 3 and 42nd minutes, or whatever, 3 minutes and 40 seconds, whatever the remaining time was that the Riders didn't have it. The Lions had 3 possessions in 3 minutes, while the Riders had, I think, 2 in the 11 minutes time, because they were chewing so much clock. They were moving the chains. It was just very unfortunate, and kind of brings me into, the turnovers now, and something that we can talk about here is BC's finally starting to generate some momentum. They have a scoring drive with Keon Hatcher. They're looking to potentially maybe grab hold of this game, and start to lead, I guess, the game. And James Butler has a very costly fumble. Now, this is a tough one to definitely navigate, because there was one replay, and actually Farhan Lalji actually tweeted this out during the game, that he thought the same thing of, the replay showed that he thought the angle was that JB's knee was down before he lost possession of the football. I thought the same thing. Now, they only showed the replay once on the TSN broadcast. I'm curious how many times they were able to get a look at it up in the command center. I think that was the one true look of it possibly being, overturned. I think the unfortunate thing for the BC Lions is that it was called a fumble on the field, and that in that situation, you need conclusive evidence for it to be overturned. And if you can't have conclusive evidence, if the replay is not conclusive enough, you're at the mercy of what was called on the field. I think it was that close of a bang play of, his knee being down, the ball coming out. Although I do think it was the wrong call at the end of the day, I think it was close enough to be, not be egregiously upset of, oh my goodness, the refs blew the call. I think, unfortunately for James Butler, right, he put it up into the hands of the review system. And although it was a close call, it went the other way of the BC Lions, and kind of things spiraled out of control from there, in a sense, for the BC Lions, who showed some life at points after that outcome, and started to show points when talking about the turnovers, transitioning into the next one, starting to show life, moving the ball, starting to get into scoring position to end the first half, looking like they're going to potentially take the lead to go into the half. They end up getting a touchdown, what looks to be like a touchdown to end the half with about 20 seconds or so left, to Justin McInnis. Justin McInnis gets behind the defense, catches the ball, what looks to be a touchdown. No touchdown on the play. McInnis offside, probably the reason why he got the step on the defender behind him. The ball ends up coming back. No touchdown on the play. I believe it was 1, 2, maybe 3 plays later. Jeremiah Masoli trying to go to the left side of the field where Keon Hatcher is. He's late on the ball. Definitely could argue that Keon Hatcher should have tried to fight back a little harder to the football. He doesn't do that. Tavon Campbell intercepts it for an 80-plus yard pick six to end the first half. And that's essentially your ball game right there. It was the TSN turning point of a 17-point swing before the Lions even know what hit them, because with the Lions electing to receive the ball to start the game, that meant the Saskatchewan Roughriders were getting the ball to start the third quarter. And of course, when it comes to the BC Lions being in field goal range to end the half, not coming away with at least 3 points that they should have had, you look at the pick six, that you take away the 3 points off the board for the Lions, you add 7 points onto the board for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and then they come out and they have a touchdown drive to start the third quarter, and it's 17-point swing. And the Riders, you could pretty much, secure it for the Riders that it was going to be a victory for them from that point out, because Masoli wasn't going to be able to muster that comeback, just the way he was feeling. Farhan Lalji kind of tweeted it out as well. That felt like a dagger. That felt like a throw that you don't come back from, in terms of, the boogeyman, ghosts in your head, seeing stuff that's maybe not there. You could clearly tell, because what happened for the rest of the game, Jeremiah Masoli continued to throw interceptions, 3 interceptions on the night. When you pair it with the 3 interceptions that Jeremiah Masoli had and the one backbreaking fumble that James Butler had, you're not going to win those ball games 9 times out of 10. And those are self-inflicting wounds that you're doing. In a sense, teams necessarily aren't even beating you. You're beating yourselves. When you look at back-to-back weeks of 4 turnovers, last week versus the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, when they lose the turnover battle 4-2, and then this week you turn over the 7 days and you lose it 4-0 versus the Riders. It's not a shock that the BC Lions lost 37-18 tonight. There's a valid reason to not only the turnovers, how they played, the lack of execution, etc. You can continue to go on and down the list. So when talking about the turnovers, they're very frustrating. I think you could probably argue the most frustrating part of this game. When you're looking at coming into the game, the Lions were a -5 in the turnover battle. When you end the game and they're a -9, that's not a good thing for the BC Lions. That's not a good football team, if we're being honest. -9 in the turnover differential. There's a reason why the BC Lions are 1-3. It's going to be an interesting one to see how they turn things around. For me, I kind of somewhat predicted this, or I guess I did predict this in a sense, because I did pick Saskatchewan to win, but I thought it was kind of an acceptable outcome, if that's the best way to say it, for the BC Lions, that if they split versus Saskatchewan, say lose in Regina, make sure they take care of business in BC Place in a few weeks here. They lose to Montreal and make sure that they beat Edmonton in Edmonton, which is, shouldn't be, and maybe I shouldn't say shouldn't be a hard task because of the way that the BC Lions have looked in the last few weeks. I'm sure that's going to be a tough task compared to how the Lions have looked. But to say that, they can't go in there and win, I think is not, that's nobody's going to think that that's a hot take around the CFL, the way that Edmonton Elks have looked. I think it'll be basically a pick 'em, especially being in Edmonton, the way the BC Lions have looked. Most likely, if we're being honest, coming off of 4 straight losses, if you're the BC Lions, losing twice to the Blue Bombers, losing to Saskatchewan, losing to Montreal, and then going into Edmonton, it'll probably be something like a pick 'em because Edmonton probably doesn't have their first win of the season quite yet. They still look bad, but the BC Lions have looked bad as well. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of it in a few weeks. With that being said, I think the Lions, it's an acceptable outcome of going 2-2 over the next month of the season, as I said in the little video we put up on our YouTube channel. If they can get to 3-5 on the year, or would that be 3-5? They're 1-3, 2 more loss, or 1 more loss. They'd be 3-4, I guess, would be the record. They're 1-3 now. 1 more loss to Montreal, 4, 2 more wins. So if they get to 3-4 on the season after the Saskatchewan game, I think that's a huge, I shouldn't say a huge win, but that's a victory in the Lions' eyes. Well, at least it should be when it comes to the broadcast team was just chatting about it in terms of Suter and Dusty. If, you're the Lions and you kind of come out of the next 2 weeks of the season and you played Winnipeg twice, Saskatchewan once, would be twice, and then Montreal, you played you played the toughest of the tough around the CFL, and hopefully now you can start to take advantage of the CFL schedule starting to get a little bit easier for your team, for yourself if you're the Lions. And it's going to be no easy feat because teams are going to be getting better, right? The Torontos of the world with, Chad Kelly returning in week number 7 when we start to see some of the East opponents later on in the season. Drew Brown returning for Ottawa. Burton Adams is yet to throw a touchdown pass for Calgary. I think that's going to start to change. As bad as the Elks look, I think they will start to show a little bit more of competitiveness. You already saw a little bit more of competitiveness last game versus Winnipeg. It's just going to be an interesting one and something that, as I said, this isn't a good football team right now, but this is not something that I think Lions fans should necessarily panic as of yet. This is something that definitely feel free to be concerned. I'm concerned, but not something that I would press the panic button. I would not say that the season is necessarily over as of yet. I would say expectations have definitely taken a hit. That's for sure realistic in terms of expectations. I think more realistic expectations for this team are now, that 3rd slot or crossing over to the Eastern Division. When you look at the, top of the West, I don't think BC's in the class of Winnipeg or Saskatchewan. When you look at that 3rd place spot now, I think BC, Calgary are kind of in the same realm until, we see Calgary and BC match up together and one team maybe proves that they're a little bit better for at least that matchup. Edmonton, I think, until proven otherwise, is by far kind of in the basement of the Western Division. So don't panic. Hang around, as I mentioned. Get to 3-4. The schedule will start to ease up a little bit. Hopefully by, Labor Day, you're able to be at least over 500. And then once it's past Labor Day, hit the ground running, start to get hot going into the playoffs. And although it's not ideal, although I still right now don't believe that you're in the tier of Saskatchewan or Winnipeg, get to Labor Day with your head above water and not be, say 2-6, 1-7, whatever it may be. Get to Labor Day with some life, and let's see what can happen down the back half of the stretch, back half of the season with a BC Lions team that's hopefully a little bit healthier and hopefully has Nathan Rourke under center for the majority or the remainder of the BC Lions season. So, I guess what we want to talk about next is to get into the defense here shortly, folks. I believe we're still live on YouTube only, so if you guys are, please feel free to chime in on the YouTube chat. Let us know how you guys are feeling. love to know how you guys are feeling after that one, because if you're a Lions fan, you're probably not too happy. And that's why you're tuning in, though. These things are, as I always like to say, a little bit therapeutic for fans, and you can talk things out a little bit, and sometimes feel a little bit better by the end of these things. I won't say all the time, but sometimes by the end of this thing, you could have a little bit better of an idea of how this team maybe played, or maybe just how they could maybe go forward in a better direction. So let me get a little bit of a drink here, folks. As I do this solo once again, pretty much turning this into a one-man band without Blake. And usually when I do my little water breaks, but Blake's MIA once again, as I said on the preview this week. So who knows when we'll see him again. Let's get into the defense here, which is, another tricky conversation to have, I think, when it comes to the defense conversation. I think this one, the best way I could put it, I guess, is when talking about the defense's performance tonight, it's a layered conversation. On one hand, they got absolutely gashed once again on the ground. 30 plus carries given up, 180 plus yards given up on the ground. AJ Ouellette looked fantastic. Tommy Stevens was, Tommy Stevens in short yardage situations. The Riders, as I said, questioned the physicality of the BC Lions defense, and it wasn't answered. And on the other hand, the BC Lions offense absolutely hung out the defense to dry when it comes to not being able to stay on the field, not be able to move the chains. You look at time of possession, and the defense was on the field for darn near 40 minutes of the game, 2/3 of the game, and wonder why they were hands on knees by the end of the third quarter, because they were absolutely gassed. So to say that the defense played horrible, I don't know if I could go that far. I would love to see them play better. Absolutely. I would love to see them be able to make a few more game-changing plays. I've been calling for that. I would love to see them finally have a backbone in the run game. Excuse me. I would love to finally see them have a run. I would love to finally see them have a backbone and stand up in the run game. And they have yet to do that. But when it comes to them being on the field, you look at Jake Maier, who before the you can't even call it a garbage time touchdown, because it wasn't it wasn't on the other side. They had a legitimate touchdown to end the game. I believe 40 yarder, might have been like 37 yarder to Del Duncan Busby. Jake Maier was 12 of 22 for 140-ish yards or something like that. No touchdowns, no interceptions. Like the defense did a fine job of getting some stops when they had to, getting the Saskatchewan Roughriders off the field when they had to. But when it came to manning up in the run, they couldn't stop them once again. So, like I mentioned, it's a layered conversation to have. They got to be better at run defense. That's a must. But when it comes to them being on the field for that amount of time, it's kind of to be expected that they got gashed for that amount of yards. It's no surprise when they're on the field when you look at the end of the game and it's 38, just over 38 minutes time possession for the Riders, and the BC Lions are sitting at 22 minutes, 21 minutes time of possession. Not great at all. Almost double on behalf of the Riders. So it's something that the Lions need to get fixed. I think they're taking steps in the right direction when their defense over the last few games hasn't played, I don't think, terrible. They also haven't played great, and they haven't done enough for the team to win. They haven't generated, you could look at last game and maybe you could argue they generated, the 2 interceptions with Boyu's interception. Robert Carter had the interception as well. They didn't generate enough game-changing plays, as I said, with, being able to potentially turn over the football. You look at Matthew Betts, who was able to have a sack in the game. Great effort on the sack with Dwayne Hendricks, who kind of chipped in, and I don't know if they're going to award it to both guys of a half sack, or Betts is going to truly get the sack by himself. But another one to talk about, and we'll talk about injuries maybe in a little bit here. Betts leaves the game and doesn't return is another one that's a gut punch, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But to kind of put a bow on things when it comes to the defense, hopefully there's some. I think if anything, the defense has at least some digestible film that you can go back and watch and feel, I don't want to say good about yourself, feel better about yourself, feel like there's some things that you guys can correct that maybe not necessarily, the Riders did more to beat you, but a lot of the time the Lions are beating themselves more often than not right now, it feels like, of maybe missing the big tackle, not being able to, get the sack in the backfield, not being able to bring down the ball carrier in the backfield, not being able to bring the ball carrier down on first contact, whatever it may be. It just feels like the Lions are unable to do it right now on defense. And for I think they're more so than the offense of the 1 or 2 steps forward, 3 or 4 steps back. The defense feels a little bit more of some positive momentum in terms of, 2 or 3 steps forward, 3 or 4 steps back, where the offense just feels like it's not moving forward right now. It feels like no steps forward, 3 or 4 steps back, no steps forward, 3 or 4 steps back. So let's get into the offense now before we wrap things up here a little bit. I see the boys, Nate Boat in the chat. Nate, I'll be there in probably about 20 minutes, my brother. Excited to watch the game with the boys and enjoy a fine Saturday night as I look out the window. It looks like it's a beauty night. So I'll see you boys in about 20, 25 minutes or so. Hopefully the fights, hopefully I'm not missing too many of the fights, but gotta handle business first, unfortunately, and talk about try to polish this one. Try to polish the turd, I believe is the saying. But when talking about, or when moving on, I guess, down the list here of things I wanted to talk about before we get out of here, and kind of one thing that I wanted to talk about for sure was the quarterback situation, and something that I went back and forth with a few people on social media to end the game of, this is by no means me defending Jeremiah Masoli, saying he's playing good. He is not. But for those that are screaming and yelling for the Chase Brice, let's see Chase Brice. There's an obvious reason that he did not beat Jeremiah Masoli out of the competition in preseason nor training camp. I don't believe that it's going to get better with the switch between Masoli and Brice. I personally think that the only thing that's going to make this offense better is the return of Nathan Rourke under center. I don't think Masoli is the answer. He is clearly past his due date, is probably the nicest way to put it. And Chase Brice, the guy you've tried to so-called develop or have in the building, in-house since 2023, clearly hasn't worked. Clearly is something that you need to move off of in the offseason, because if you don't feel comfortable enough to play Chase Brice after watching this, what does that say about Chase Brice, if we're being honest? And that's what I'm trying to get across to those fans that are, let's see Chase Brice, let's see Chase Brice. What does that say about Chase Brice if he's not even getting any action versus Jeremiah Masoli, who looks like this? And yes, obviously he comes in a little bit of garbage time today. And what did I say? This is why the coaches probably aren't playing him. He almost himself threw a pick six to Marcus Sayles on the first possession of the game he goes into. So this is why I said that, no, I'm not saying that Jeremiah Masoli is playing good. He's not. I'm not defending Jeremiah Masoli. I'm not. But to say or to whine and bitch, quite frankly, on social media of, well, why aren't the Lions playing Chase Brice? There's clearly a reason. He clearly doesn't look better than Jeremiah Masoli, which says all you need to know. And the Lions need to fix their backup quarterback issue next offseason. And it's something that, unfortunately, for those fans that want to, me being included, of wanting to see a better option at backup quarterback, that short yardage position as well. When you pay a guy so much and you're so committed to a franchise quarterback like you are Nathan Rourke, you're not as high, or you're not, the priority of finding a backup quarterback isn't priority number one in the offseason of going out and finding the Cody Fajardo of this offseason. As we saw, didn't really work out. The McLeod Bethel Thompson that the Montreal Alouettes thought that they maybe found in a backup quarterback, right? With the unprovenness of Davis Alexander. Let's make sure we go out and get a veteran quarterback like MBT, who's won a Grey Cup, who's proven he can play in this league. Case in point there, that having maybe, or taking a swing at the so-called maybe top of the backup quarterback, category doesn't always pay off. When you look at a guy like Cody Fajardo, I think that's maybe a better case in point of when talking about probably the feelings in that Edmonton Elks organization of uncertainty around Trey Ford. Okay, yes, let's go out and get a Cody Fajardo because, uncertainty of Trey Ford's future. Makes sense. When, you have a guy like, you look at the situation now over in Toronto, Chad Kelly, big time quarterback, highly paid. You're not as, motivated to go out and find the best backup quarterback available in the market and pay him. You're more worried about finding or filling other holes on your roster come free agency, right? So that's why they have Nick Arbuckle. That's why they're, playing other guys. Case in point, in Calgary with, PJ Walker and I think those other guys. They're committed to Vernon Adams Jr. There's no need to Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And you could argue Chris Streveler has improved. So Winnipeg Blue Bombers maybe is kind of debunked that a little bit with Chris Streveler's play, but I would argue that Chris Streveler still needs to prove that he's consistent enough. So when talking about like as I mentioned, just to kind of come back to the quarterback situation from the BC Lions, if fans magically think that, the quarterback situation is going to get any better without Nathan Rourke, I think you're crazy. Nathan Rourke's the only quarterback that's going to be able to fix the offense's problems right now, issues. And hopefully that comes next week versus Montreal, which I don't think is a guarantee if we're being honest right now. I think it's truly going to be a day-by-day process with Nathan Rourke of letting him go and practice, seeing how he feels the next day, letting him go and practice, seeing how he feels the next day, and getting the game day and seeing how he feels once again. I think this is also going to be an issue of how does he feel when he gets hit for the first time. It's not going to be, I'm sure, a nice feeling. I'm sure it's going to be a possible, he plays and it could be a miss, Tuesday light practice. It could be a limited participant. It could be, all week where he's pretty sore. So I think that's the other thing. I don't think it's a guarantee we see Nathan Rourke next week in Montreal. For those people that do think it is as close, which I do think it is close. I think it was truly closer to a game time decision this week than it was last week in Winnipeg. But for those that, I don't know why I always want to say Chris Cuthbert. Oh man, I don't know why I always want to say Chris Cuthbert, but it's not. And I don't know why it's on the tip of my tongue, but the broadcast team, when talking about Nathan Rourke, were basically like, hey, we're gonna see Nathan Rourke next week in Montreal, almost book it. Where I don't think it's as much of a guarantee as kind of they were talking about to end the game. As I said, I think this injury, the way Nathan Rourke throws, I think is going to be something that Lions are going to take as precaution as possible. And I think I'm fine with it. Like I'm on their side of making sure that when Nathan Rourke returns, he's 100% as possible. I think that's the right decision to do, even if it means holding him out of Montreal next week, as painful as that may be to watch, of Montreal Alouettes defense versus a Jeremiah Masoli or Chase Bryce-led offense. Boy, do I not want to see that one. I think that would be a long day for the Lions offense. I absolutely think it's the right decision to do because, as I said earlier in the video and in previous ones, the Lions, I think, are a perfectly acceptable outcome of going 2-2. The sky maybe falling within the fan base, and I'm sure they're going to start to press the panic button. But within that locker room, stay tight, stay, head down, chopping wood, and just get to after this stretch 3-4, and you start to see the Hamiltons come in and Toronto's and stuff like that, and Edmonton's. I think the Lions will be able to survive this very poor start to the year, being able to go 2-2 throughout this month stretch, but it's going to be no easy task for them. So I guess lastly here, folks, I will kind of get a quick sip. Lastly, the injuries. Matthew Betts left with what Farhan Lalji mentioned as a arm injury. Not ideal. Farhan, I didn't necessarily see the play, and didn't note. I guess I should say I didn't notice the play. I heard them mentioning about or chatting about it. Didn't notice the play, and then was the TSN broadcast gave an update to start the second half that Matthew Betts would not return to the game with a arm injury, I believe is what was reported. And Farhan Lalji mentioned that he was unable to pick up his arm, kind of looked like he was just dangling by his side. Farhan was suggesting or hoping, I guess, is maybe a better way to say it, of not a serious or long-term injury for Matthew Betts. So definitely crossing your fingers if you're a Lions fan on that one, because they can ill afford to lose a guy like Matthew Betts along that defensive line who registers his first sack of the season. Great thing to see. But the BC Lions just don't have enough juice right now along that defensive line, especially when you look at the losses of Jonah Tavai coming into this game, not placed on the 6th game, which is a good sign. Hopefully he's able to return back to the lineup soon, who is playing at a high level, arguably the best player on the defense coming into this game. Dwayne Hendricks, another guy who you could argue was playing at the highest level on this defense. Both guys in the interior of the defensive line. Dwayne Hendricks leaves this game with injury. Hopefully we have an update after this one. Wasn't able to listen to any of the media availabilities before we went live, so hopefully after this one I can go check those out and we have some updates on the injuries. For any of those that are listening that have listened to the post-game media availabilities, please feel free to give me any updates in the chat. But it's something to monitor for sure when it comes to the defensive line, who are now after the game are without 3 of their 4 starters coming into the game, or coming into the season, I guess I should say, of Tavai, Hendricks, and Betts possibly out. Hopefully the last 2 are able to return and Tavai is able to return to the lineup soon. Another possible injury, I didn't get any updates, didn't see what happened, didn't know if it was maybe more play related or what was the decision went into it. I questioned this and was, I think, the only one that was kind of wondering what was going on in that situation of Anai Una, the guy who was the player who was projected to be the starter at right guard going into the season. He was given the keys going into the offseason, going into training camp, was given the longest runway to start at right guard, started the first preseason game at right guard down in Victoria, gets hurt, ends up coming back, was available for the last, when looking at the injury report, was available to play and dressed for the BC Lions for the last 3 weeks, did not. I thought that was a very odd thing when the guy that you projected at right guard you didn't want to bring back into the lineup right away, and kind of maybe foreshadowed the way that they thought he performed. Now, I'm not going to bury Anai Una on the post-game report tonight, but I thought that, the few times that I ISO-cammed, I guess you could say, Una, the one time specifically I ISO-cammed Una, Micah Johnson, which, Micah Johnson, CFL veteran, well established, a proven guy, proven professional in the CFL, who's done it for a long time. Maybe not as much of a slight as it comes off of, I guess, when it comes to a guy that's essentially a rookie. When it comes to Anai Una, who was drafted last year, yes, didn't play in any regular season games, was basically on the practice roster for a majority of last season. Basically his first real regular season game action, and Micah Johnson walked him back into Jeremiah Masoli and ended up batting the pass down. Another few times I saw him and he was kind of tripping over his own feet, and it didn't look great. So I'm curious of, maybe it was the writing on the wall was just they didn't believe in Anauna to put him back in the game or to put him back in the starting lineup. They kind of saw enough and weren't pleased with, not being able to pivot to who I think they were hoping to, and David Foucault with, Anauna goes down in preseason game number 1, David Foucault goes down in preseason game number 2, and the Lions going into the regular season are behind the 8 ball at that right guard position. And now I think it's even more of a revolving door when it comes to, you had Una, you've had Foucault, you had, you know, um, um, Slugger, I guess, played a little bit as well, and then Packer as well. And like I said, I didn't hear what the reasoning was behind Packer coming out of the game, whether it was play related or just wanting to switch things up or an injury. Like I said, if anybody has listened to the post game availabilities by the media yet, please let me know if there's any updates on the injuries. But before we get out of here, guys, I see a few more from Ryan, friend of the show. Ryan, appreciate you for tuning in. I know you tuned in last week. I see you followed the account on Facebook, I believe, or I think I saw you like the post on the BC Lions Facebook page. I appreciate you for tuning in, buddy, and appreciate you supporting. I'm glad you enjoy. That's what we try to do here on the post game report and our previews. And as I said, right, to start the show, and as hard as these things are, I really do think that these are a good opportunity to kind of be, a therapeutic session, as crazy as this might sound. But as much as I love football, and I'm sure you do, and a lot of these CFL fans and all the fanatics out there love football, great opportunity to kind of like talk things through, talk things out. Obviously, it's a frustrating thing to do, and it's disappointing sometimes, and it's frustrating even sometimes. I won't even admit it, or I will even admit it. But I feel like a lot of the time you can kind of talk through some things, and you feel a little bit better on the other side and get a little bit better of an idea on the game, maybe get a better view or a different opinion on the game, especially for myself too, of wanting to, always go back, rewatch the game the next morning, something that I don't know if I'm going to be able to do tomorrow, actually going out with the family, with a little family dinner. So excited for that, to kind of get away from football for a few hours anyways tomorrow. And then actually I definitely will I will be able to rewatch the game tomorrow. I got the house to myself for the Canada Day long weekend, so I'm quite excited for that one. Carly is out of town. Carly, for those that aren't aware, is my girlfriend, and Carly's out of town with the girlfriends for the weekend for a bachelorette. So I'm excited to have some fun with the family tomorrow, and I'll probably come home and maybe around dinner time I'll rewatch the game, and that's when I really like to get a better idea of kind of how the game went. This one, I know that there's kind of no way of spinning things. This game went bad, but maybe a better idea of, say, how the BC Lions pass defense was compared to, I think the BC Lions pass the the BC Lions defense against the running was terrible. I can get maybe a better idea of, some of the turnovers, how timely they were, some of the injuries as well. That's why I like as well going back and rewatching the game, as much as and as painful as it is. It's kind of similar to this, where it is a little bit therapeutic and you can kind of get a better idea. Ryan, once again, buddy, I appreciate you. He says, always enjoy hearing your take on the game. I also try to my best. I'm not as good with it as I am. I'm not as good with the Buffalo Bills as I am with the BC Lions when it comes to my two favorite football teams. When the Buffalo Bills, I've been a fan as long as I can remember. From my 4th birthday of getting a Bruce Smith jersey for my, as I said, my birthday. The Lions, I do a better job of not riding the roller coaster that is a long season. That not faulting anybody for it, especially the fanatics out there. That's why we're the Canadian Football Fanatics, because we are fans at heart, and because we want you guys to be fans and express yourselves on a weekly basis. But the roller coaster that is a CFL season, 18 games, 21 weeks long, I didn't maybe accept it as much, say a few years ago. But friend of the show, friend of mine, probably a good reason why, but he is a Edmonton Elks fan. But Daryl, would always like to say that, the real season doesn't start till Labor Day, right? And I think is pretty true in a sense of, as long as you don't completely bury yourself by Labor Day, if you're hanging around. If you're within 1 or 2 games of that playoff bar, you are right within the thick of things in the playoff race. With only 9 teams in the entire league, 4 and 5 teams in each division. As long as you don't sink yourself, just hang around, try not to ride the roller coaster of some weeks are bad, some weeks are really bad, some weeks are good, right? We just saw, right, case in point with Montreal fans, right, of not wanting to ride the roller coaster. If I'm Montreal, I'm really like, I'm more so probably like tipping my cap to Hamilton. Great win. Am I tripping that I lost to Hamilton in week number 4? Not really, especially when you look at our starting quarterback didn't play. Davis Alexander wasn't under center. It was MVT. I ain't tripping too bad. We got bigger fish to fry come the end of the season. We know what we're playing for. We're playing for October. We're playing for November. Obviously, the Montreal Alouettes would like to win every game that, as professional athletes are competitors. But I think as the long season is, you're going to have games like that where you're going to have stinkers. You're going to have really good ones. You're going to have a lot of blowouts. Maybe not a lot of blowouts, but if you're Montreal, you're going to have some blowouts. And what I try to do best as possible from a Lions perspective every week, Ryan, that I think a lot of people maybe try to enjoy a little bit better. Of like, I don't like to come on here and be negative all post game. I like to try to spin things as positive as I can and try to actually find silver linings out of this. I think my past history, being able to draw on my experience playing a decent high level of football recently, and it's funny I say recently, but not wanting to I'm in that tricky age of saying that I'm old when I'm actually really not. But having not played football now for 6 years, it's funny. When I say recently, and it's now going on 6 years, which is kind of funny. I draw on my experience, right, of like, that's something that you're not able to do, right? Of like, when you're in the thick of things and you're a player, you tend to lean on those cliches of like, it's a week to week league. You don't worry about what happened in the past. You tend to watch the film, and then try to take what you can from it, flush it, and move on. It's on to the next week, because you can't worry about the past week when you're worrying about the next week. If you're, say, worried about the pass, the interception you threw to Roland Milligan last week when you're playing against Lawal Uguak, Isaac Berglund, and the rest of Darnell Sankey and company, you better be worried about what's in front of you rather than what's happened behind you, because you got enough on your plate as is. So I think that's going to do it, folks, for us. I want to do a little bit of a shorter post-game report, as I mentioned, and I want to go enjoy the rest of my Saturday night, as I said, with the fellas watching the UFC fights. Good ones tonight as well, folks. Personally, I don't know if anybody that's tuning in is UFC fans that got it on maybe in the background. Tonight, I'm going for Kai Kara fans, as well as I do love myself some Charles Do Bronx Oliveira. And as much as I would love to see him win, I think my head tells me that Ilia Topuria is going to win tonight in the main event. But some exciting fights that I'm excited to go check out with the fellas and enjoy the rest of my Saturday night with. I enjoyed this with you guys and doing a BC Lions post-game report, even though the Lions fell 37-18 in a BTA, belt to ass fashion. But it's all good, folks, because the Lions are on to the next one. They have bigger things to worry about when it comes to the Montreal Alouettes coming up, and then things start to get a little bit easier when it comes to Edmonton at home versus Saskatchewan. Hopefully they're able to figure things out for that stretch, and then hit the ground running when it comes to middle of July into August, and then getting into Labor Day as well. So that is going to basically put a bow on the BC Lions post-game report for week number 4, folks. 4 weeks down already, a month of the season X'd out. I can't believe how fast things are flying by already. As I mentioned, solo, basically probably going to be doing the rest of the season solo. We'll see how things go, as Blake is MIA once again. But honestly, cool with me. I've been able to handle things with ease, so not the biggest issue for me. I really enjoyed, for those that have been tuning in and commenting along, my thoughts. Continue to follow along with the BC Lions this season. We will have a BC Lions week number 5 preview for you guys coming up later this upcoming week. We'll be sitting down with probably one of the 2 guys from the Alouettes Flight Deck podcast, whether it be Cliffy or Tim, to preview this upcoming week's game. And then, of course, I'll be jumping back on the weekly show. Missed out on all the fun this week with the fellows being Coach, Shane, and Blake. And then, of course, we'll be back next week with our BC Lions post-game report. As I said, make sure you guys are following along to our social media platforms. You guys can see those below on Twitter or X @_CF Fanatics. Is probably the best place to find our updates in terms of if next week will be a live post-game report or pre-recorded. And then you guys can find us on Instagram @Canadian Football Fanatics over there as well. Please, folks, head over to our Instagram and continue to follow as we push towards 3,000 followers. And don't be shy. Head over to our Twitter account as well. Hit the follow button over there as we are a little bit of slower growth over there, but do not worry as we are continuing to grow on all platforms. So follow us on all of our platforms. If you guys are tuning in right now on YouTube, please feel free to like the video, comment down below how you guys are feeling about our post-game report and all of our coverage this season on behalf of the BC Lions. It's been a ton of fun covering this team on a weekly basis, although I love if the team could start winning some more. I think these post-game reports would be a little bit more fun and more interactive. With that being said, still grateful, thankful for all the opportunities I have to cover this league, cover this team. And as I said last week, it's kind of hard to be upset when it comes to what I do right now. Of like, I'm talking about football, baby. This is stuff that I love to do, and super blessed, super grateful to do what I do. So as mentioned, like, comment, most importantly, subscribe to the channel, guys. I see 3 people tuning in right now on YouTube. The odds are 75% of the people, so let's just say 2/3 of you guys are unsubscribed to the channel. Please, 2 of you guys that are watching, subscribe to the channel. It would be greatly appreciated. I believe we are just under 410 subscribers on the YouTube. So what's wrong with that conversation, folks? We have 3,000 followers on Instagram. Why don't we have 3,000 subscribers on YouTube? So head over to our YouTube, subscribe to the channel. It would be greatly appreciated when you guys subscribe. Press the notification bell. You guys get notified every single time we go live like this or upload any sort of content on the channel, whether it be a video, YouTube reel, etc. So that's going to do it for our BC Lions Week 4 post-game report as the BC Lions fall 37-18 to the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And we'll see you guys on our BC Lions Week number 5 preview when they take on the Montreal Alouettes next week. See you guys.